Hi everyone! Today I'm going to review Arrtx Colored Pencils. This is the set of 126 pencils. I want to thank to Arrtx for sending me these pencils and to give me the opportunity to explore more about these pencils. In this video, we will be going through the packaging, the pencils themselves, and we will also do some tests and we will try the colored pencils in the coloring books. After that, I will also share my thoughts on using these pencils in coloring book with Amazon paper and with better paper. Let's start with the packaging. As you can see, the box is beautiful, sturdy, and if we open it, we find no pencils here because I have all my pencils on the table. However, the set of 126 pencils includes 2 compartments, and in each we are having the pencils that are standing there like this. Now, about this packaging. If the box is empty, then it's really easy to transfer it whenever we want. However, if the box is loaded with colored pencils, the bottom parts, the stands, are actually quite heavy. So if we pick the box and we would want to transfer it, this is exactly what can happen. This is a little bit dangerous if you have all the pencils in the box and it's closed and you want to move it around. So that's a thing that you should keep in mind. Be careful and always support your box from the bottom. Another thing that is a little bit uncomfortable is actually the inner part. You can see that we have one big hole, actually 3 big holes that should hold the pencils, and even though it's formed into the shape of the pencils, still if we have some pencils in there and it's not fully loaded, then the pencils are just falling. Well, they can stand on their own, but it's very easy to make them fall. And also because we have actually 3 rows, so 1 row of pencils is in the middle. Which means if we will use the pencils and we will sharpen them and we will have only this little pencil, then I can imagine that it can get totally lost in the middle of all the other pencils and it can be really challenging to get it out. That makes me to transfer all the pencils from these beautiful stands into some another pencil case or just place them somewhere else than have them in the box. Personally, I don't see a problem to have my pencils out of the original box. Actually, I do that with almost all my pencils, and I am having a beautiful wooden drawer with like 6 compartments, and I have 3, but one is smaller. And I am storing all my pencils regardless the brand in them, and that's how I store my pencils. So it's not really a big deal not having a perfectly balanced box. On the other hand, it's really small and it doesn't take much space on your table. So that's definitely a plus. What I missed in the packaging was actually to have some physical swatch card. I think having swatch chart isn't really necessary, but it's something that we are already used to because every other brands are doing that, and every time you open the box, you have the swatch card in some form. Sometimes you have it on the other side of the cover, but here I didn't found any swatch card that I could fill by myself. So at first I did my own swatches in my swatch book. Well, I do have a swatch book for all my swatches, but not everyone can really have it or is willing to have it because we always get those swatch cards in the packaging. So I didn't really mind that. However, I went to check out their website And I have found actually that they are having swatch cards for every of their products. You can print it on whatever paper you want and you can fill it and use it. And I think this is so great because even though many of people will be glad and will require to have swatch card in the set, not everyone will require or be bothered that there is no swatch card, right? So for me, this is a great option how to provide swatch cards for those who really need them or want them and not waste too much of the paper. Let's look at the pencils themselves. We have a beautiful pencil with a 3.8 millimeter core, and according to the Arrtx website, they are wax-based. And if we look at the pencil, I really like the star design. This is really, really pretty. We also have Arrtx brand name here. And overall, the pencil is quite light and nice to hold in hand. However, there are few things that are slightly uncomfortable. Well, what is a little bit more uncomfortable is the silver writing. We have pencil name and pencil number at the end of the pencil, but as you can see, the writing is really small and really shiny. And it was really hard to read and write down when I needed to do a swatch or when I needed to write down the pencils that I was using for the color along. So what I did, I took little stickers and I just wrote the pencil numbers on it and I stick it to the end of the pencil. I must say this is much more comfortable than reading these small shiny letters and numbers. So I recommend to do this if you are struggling with that as well. Another thing is that sometimes the color of the barrel doesn't match the actual color that you see later on the paper. However, this is not a huge issue and it's actually kinda understandable. And then we have also colors that are very close to each other in color. For example, manganese blue and ocean blue. These two colors are so similar, same like pale vermilion and cadmium orange deep, or lime green and true green. If we look very closely on these colors, then we can see a slight difference between shades. However, the difference is so little that it can be really unrecognizable, especially in the coloring. On the other hand, this can actually be a benefit if you like the color and you are using it a lot and you are running out of this color, then you have another one that is almost the same, right? On the other hand, I get that we would like to have a large variety of colors in the set and not repeating colors. So it's just the point of view. Speaking of the variety of the colors, I really like how large variety we have in this set. We have a lot of blue colors here, a lot of greens, browns, but also purple and pinks and reds. I really like how much of the yellow and yellow-orange colors we have. As usually, I would be totally okay if there would be no neon colors and no metallic colors. I really don't use these and I don't like them, and I could use 6 more other colors, or 5 in this case. But you know that you can find these in every set, or almost in every set. During my whole experience, my whole testing, I experienced only a little breakage, and it was on this rose red color. You can see that the original pencil is big like this, and the rose red is really small. At one point, it broke like 4 or 5 times in my sharpener, and I'm using electric sharpener. Specifically, it's Rapesco brand. It's quite cheap, but it does the job. And I had no problem with any other pencils. So this was the only one that was breaking down like this, but all the other pencils were sharpened with no problems. Also, I really like that we can have quite big point, which lasts for some while coloring, so you don't have to sharpen the pencils that often. Now let's look at the tests. And though I usually don't think about the performance of the pencils and I just feel it the moment I grab the pencil and start to do something with them, usually coloring, right? However, this time I really wanted to go deep and to get to know these pencils. And you can use this as a template for every of your art medium. You can use it not only for the pencils, but you can also try it with acrylic markers or alcohol markers. So as the first, I wanted to try how these pencils layer on top of each other. How many layers I can comfortably have without the feel that I am only hurting the paper. And I tried that twice, and in both cases I felt comfortable with 3 layers. Every other layer that was added on top felt like something unnecessary and something that didn't add any value or any depth or anything, and that only pushed the paper and hurt the paper. So I would say 2 layers are the best, but 3 layers are still comfortable to use. Next, I wanted to try how they blend. So I prepared 4 media. First, I was blending with the lighter shade, then with white, then with blender pencil. I was using the blender stick from Caran d'Ache, and then I tried mineral spirit. I think the best result comes from using lighter shade of the color I was using. It also created some kind of the gradient, so I can imagine using this the most and do actually 2 things at once, which is blending and also doing the gradient. Then I was using white pencil, and here I was really surprised that it felt like it has no color. And I don't mean that white is white on white paper and it just feels like it doesn't have any white color. It actually have, because when I was trying white pencil on black paper, it left the mark. However, it's common that if you mix the pure color with white, then you get pastel color, pastel tone. And I didn't get it from using this white from this set. So it felt like I was using colorless blender actually. However, if we compare using white and colorless blender, and the difference is that the colorless blender really has no pigment, not even white, then the result felt very similar, almost the same. I was actually surprised by mineral spirit. I always had a good experience with it, and I was using mineral spirit many times for blending, and it always dissolved all the pigment particles completely. But this time it didn't make the job as I expected. So when the page dried, it almost felt like I didn't blend it at all. And the blend was actually very weak. Of course, I also had to try how they erase, right? So I did a layer from hard pressure to light pressure, and I tried how electric eraser and regular eraser will work. I think that all options, all the erasers worked pretty well. I also tried kneaded eraser, which is very soft eraser. It doesn't hold any shape, so you can form it as you want. So I used it mainly for lifting the pigment rather than erasing. And it lifted the pigment a little bit, but it was as I expected. I was also curious, what are the primaries? So I picked 3 warm primary colors and 3 cool primary colors. And I think that I matched the right shades. And this is really great if you can identify your primary colors, because then you can build on that and you can use them if you want to blend colors to get new shades. Now, on the next part, on the right side of this sheet, I did a little bit more interesting blending. I started with the gradient from dark to light, but using only two shades, the very dark shade and very light shade. I could use much lighter shade, but I thought that this shade was good enough and also strong enough to be visible on camera as well. I must say that the blending wasn't that bad. It's not the smoothest in the world, but I think the result is pretty decent if we take in the account that these shades are total opposite, like very dark and very light, and there is nothing between them, so I think it's quite a good result. However, it took a little bit effort to get there. Next, I was testing gradient with multicolor and gradient with single color. It's true that I could use more colors between the blue and green. I was using only one, which was something between something like aqua color, but it got lost between these two colors. It could definitely be better if I would use more colors between them. Then I continued from green to purple, and though these two colors are opposite, the gradient or the blending isn't that bad actually. And the gradient with single color, it was basically about the pressure and about getting to know how strong and opaque and how light color I can get from one color. Glazing was another technique I was trying, and I was using, I believe this was indigo blue, and I went over with yellow. And glazing isn't actually mixing. This is mostly used in watercolors, but it can be used in pencils as well. And this technique is basically changing the tone of the actual color by light layer of another color. So for example, by adding a light layer of warm yellow, you can change the feel from cool to warm. Another test was using the same color, only different temperature. So I was testing how well I can blend warm and cool colors together. So I took the yellow and I did the transition using the primary colors that I chose earlier. Now here comes the funny part. At first I mixed complementary colors because I wanted to see how they cancel each other. Mixing complementary colors isn't always only about getting matte in your artwork. And by the way, matte color is also a color. But I was trying to figure out how well I can use these colors for shading, for example, or how well they neutralize each other, because in some cases that's what we need actually. And also it's really helpful to see how each combination can make a difference. For example, if we take yellow and purple and we take all the yellows in the set and all the purples in the set and we would try to mix them together, we will always get different results depending on which specific colors we mix together. Now let's look at how well we can create the secondary color out of our primaries. And for this test I was using cool primaries, and I'm seeing that I did a mistake because this is not mixing of tertiary color but secondary color. When I'm looking at the color now, I feel that wow, this is very pretty green. And you can see that I left a little square in the top left corner where the dominant color is yellow and not blue. If you compare it against the rest of the square, you can see that the whole square is green, but the top left corner is a little bit lighter because there is the yellow that is dominant. On the other square, or this is rather the rectangle, I tried hatching with the same colors. So basically on the first square I was doing small circles, and on the second one I did hatching, so I did sharper strokes in one direction. Even though it's not blended completely, if you really focus on it, you can see clearly blue and yellow, but it should create the optical illusion of the green. Here I tried to shade with complementary color, analogous color, and black color. I was using only one color for everything, and for complementary color I was using dark green. For analogous I was using dark purple, and for black I was using black. You can see that the most drama is made out of black color. Second most expressive is shading with complementary colors. We can also get quite dramatic and 3D effect. However, for me personally, I would add black on top of it because it's just not dark enough for me, for my style. At last, shading with analogous color, as you can see, is very subtle, and it's rather like going from dark shade of the same color to the light shade of the same color. In the end, I wanted to try white and how well we can use this white on top of the other pencils, usually dark pencils, and how well we can use the other pencils over the white, how much it changed the color. Well, I prepared this before I blended with white, so I kinda knew the result. The white doesn't really leave any visible marks on top of the other pencils. And if you want to use other pencils, other colors over this white, so I filled the square or the rectangle with white first, and then I went over with these dark colors. Then it made them a little bit lighter, but I wouldn't say that it's anything dramatic. The change is so subtle, so light, that I would say it's really not needed, and it will only fill the paper tooth and you will end up with less space for layering. Alright, so now we did all the tests. Let's jump into the coloring books. I will first be coloring in Forest of Fantasy by Mei Yu. This coloring book has Amazon paper, and the paper quality makes really huge difference in how the pencils perform. You will see the difference between the page in this coloring book and then between a small part in this coloring book by Johanna Basford. But I wanted to focus on Amazon paper coloring books because I think that this is still the most used paper in coloring books, because this is the only option if artists want to self-publish on Amazon, so they cannot really choose high quality paper or any other paper than the Amazon paper. And I must say that at first I really struggled with these pencils. I must admit I was a little bit hopeless. At one point I thought, what am I doing? But it's not that easy as it sounds. First we have to take into account that I'm used to use totally different types of colored pencils. I have my own specific style. I use a lot of black, and I use a lot of blending and layering, and I just skip shades all the time, and I like to do unpredictable things. I wouldn't say that these pencils are really that flexible to let me do what I am used to do. On the other hand, the paper has a huge say in this as well. Because of this paper, like half of the pencils felt scratchy, not that smooth, and blending wasn't really that great. And also I wasn't able to get really dark darks. Even though it can look like it's dark enough, as I see it with my eyes, it looks more flat, especially on the fox, who actually is the darkest in the whole picture. I still see it more flat, and it's because I wasn't able to get sharp shadows. What I'm usually doing is that I take black pencil and outline the edge. So it's not that I would make a black line around the illustration, but I just make the shadow more crispy. And that's what creates more dimension. And I wasn't able to make it on this picture on Amazon paper with these pencils. On the other hand, here I will show you a picture from World of Flowers, and I wasn't coloring the full page, and I colored only the flower and 2 leaves. Only this small part was really enough to see that on high quality paper, these pencils performs totally differently. First of all, I didn't feel the scratchiness anymore. The pencils were also much smoother. And second, I was able to create depth and darkness actually. I think especially on the pink leaf, I created very nice contrast, and same on the blue leaf as well. However, if we look at the flower, on each petal, I was trying to make the shadow under the folds of the leaves, and I did it. However, I would like to have it more defined. So I would have to spend more time on blending and on doing the shadows. Please take into the account that these 2 leaves and this flower took me only 10 minutes. But even from this quick coloring, you can see that even the blending is much better. Let's get back to the coloring. I was actually struggling because I was trying to implement my style on these pencils and this paper. When I finished the yellow, purple, black background, I decided that I have to change my point of view and my approach. So I started to just don't care about how it blends, and it was much better. Not focusing on the technique and on perfect blending, but focusing on the process and on using the right colors together. So more on the visuals than technique. I started to have much better feeling about it, and actually even better result. In the end, it was quite fast. This page took me 2.5 hours in total, if I don't count choosing the colors, which was like an hour on top of that. Only when I got to coloring the fox, I firstly wanted to have it more bright and light, but it ended up like this because I was kinda in a hurry and I wasn't paying any attention of how much of the dark colors I'm using actually. But in the end, I like it. I was also using some metallic watercolors on top of it, and adding all the white stars and highlights really put everything together and make it shiny and bright. And I just feel that it completely changed the whole page into something better than it was before the white highlights and stars. When I finished all these colorings, I remembered that I didn't try how these pencils work with alcohol markers. But it was really late when I was coloring, so I took only a small illustration from Johanna's Christmas, and I used one of the ornament illustration on the cover page. You can see that the result is amazing. I really love the 3D effect that I was able to create, especially on the pink part. And I think that these pencils are just a great match with alcohol markers. Alright, I hope this video was helpful. Let me know in the comments whether you are using these pencils or not and what do you think about them. Have a meow someday and bye bye!